Hidden Object Guru here, joined by...
The Unabridged Gamer.
And we're doing something slightly fun. We're not going to be doing this as a co-op adventures thing, because one of us isn't close to his PS4. I was I was
Oops.
I was referencing you. No, but I will continue playing Nazi Zombie Army 4 because I really enjoy this game, and I think it's nice to have a visual in the background while we're podcasting about a certain show. So,
Mm.
what is the story here? Why am I watching a little show called Clone Wars? Well, I had never seen a single episode of this show. I actually like Samurai Jack a lot. I'm one of those people who liked Samurai Jack a lot. I love Gendy Tarkovsky's art style and animation style, which we'll talk a lot
Mm.
more about as we go through this. But I had, for whatever reason, probably because it was a little hard to track down a while ago, I didn't live in America. I didn't have the Cartoon Network. And honestly, the episodes were 3 minutes long and, kind of hard to watch when they're only 3 minutes long because they got programmed at weird times. So
Oh
you
my
put all
gosh, yes.
yeah, you put all that together, and I had never seen an episode of this show. And you're like, with all of this Clone War stuff coming out, with the show now finally being completed 15 years later, you should get around to watching it. You talked me into it, so give us a primer on why this Clone Wars show started, what it is, how it happened, and then we'll get into the discussion.
All right, so back when George Lucas was finally planning out Attack of the Clones, he was addressing a lot of things that fans had feedback for The Phantom Menace. But one of the other major things was, at that point, Lucas and the Greater Expanded Universe had kind of been actively working on two separate planes. Like, even the stuff people love, like the Thrawn trilogy, has a completely different idea about what the Clone Wars was supposed to be about.
Okay.
So when they came into it with Attack of the Clones, they had this entire thing planned out from the very early 2000s till around 2007. They had dedicated authors, storylines, video games, TV shows, the movies all interweaving. There are actually references to comic books and such, and that's actually one of the major novels in Revenge of the Sith. Like it's ironic now because it's all treated as non-canon, but at the time that stuff was being directly connected to live action films. It was an unprecedented multimedia project, literally just called the Clone Wars Project. Everything was supposed to connect and feed into each other. The characters you see in this TV show also had books, also had different stories that they would go off on. They even found ways to tie in older materials, like in the Clone Wars video game. They brought in some elements from the Knights of the Republic era by having Ulic kill Dromas or Dramas. It depends how you pronounce his name. His ghost actually factors in and helps teach Anakin some skills in order to save the Republic at one point. So all of this stuff was happening as this huge deal. All of this was going on, and this TV show was one of the most high-profile elements of it. It was meant to introduce all sorts of things, and it actually takes a lot of stuff from other people's work, like the Special Ops clone troopers that you see, the ARC troopers. Those are from Karen Travis's books with the Republic Commando series. And
I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad that I was right. And I'm like, wait a minute, are those the Republic Commandos? I love those guys. And it
they
was.
are, it's funny
A
because
version thereof.
yeah, it's like there's a lot of neat lore there that she came up with, but that is for later down the road. But just, yeah, it's kind of insane how tightly wound everything was. Like, as much as the current era is trying to come up with this streamlined continuity, the Clone Wars project just nailed it, like out of the gate. Everything working so well together that it just, to this day, I'm sort of stunned that they pulled it off because this was back before cross continuity franchises with all sorts of meta branding and everything were a huge thing. Like even earlier Star Wars stuff was kind of messy in the 90s, Shadows of the Empire aside.
Yeah. Well, no, I remember Shadows of the Empire being the first time they attempted a project like this, where they're like, we're going to have a video game and a series of comic books and a bunch of novels, and it's all going to be telling one big coherent story.
Hmm.
And I mean, I guess Shadows of the Empire was kind of a dry run for Clone Wars.
In a way, yeah, it was like they're essentially, according to Lucas, if they had had more money, he would have made it a movie. Like he would have just gone and made a midquel. But since there wasn't enough money, like I understand, there's even an official score, like as if there was a movie for Shadows of the Empire. It was available on CD, but they couldn't
By the way,
actually
I
get
gotta
it happen.
say, it is insane to think of George Lucas complaining that there wasn't enough money
Oh,
to
I
do
know.
Shadows. Dude, check out your checkbook, write $120 million check, and then just figure out how to release it later. You can pay for that entire thing out of your own pocket or the money you find in your couch cushions. And then, and you know what? You're not going to have trouble releasing it. He's like, oh, Fox didn't want to put up the money for a Shadows of the Empire movie. Who cares? Everyone's going to go see it. Are you a moron?
Yeah, it's extremely weird considering, like, there was
By the
that
way, I just
one.
want to point out that, like, millions of people bought VHS copies of the Ewok Adventure. You think people aren't going to go into the theaters to see a Shadows of the Empire movie? Of course
Yeah,
there are.
it's a thing.
I
I,
know, I know. I shouldn't be such a jerk about this, but that really does bother
oh,
me
oh
that you
no,
would
no,
not see
you're
it.
completely. As someone who definitely loves Star Wars, and this will come up later whenever talking about the CGI series that would follow the micro series,
Right.
George did sometimes really get off his rocker. The guy suggested that Starkiller in The Force Unleashed name be Darth Insanius. The other option was Darth Icky.
Oh God. Oh, that's embarrassing.
So yeah, so
Uh,
it's like you're completely fair in saying that that was ridiculous. But
but I mean, this is a man who, and I mean, I will never get over this, and I'm probably going to bring it up a lot more. Who hired like all of the best TV writers he could find to write him 65 episodes of a Star Wars TV show. And they cast people in it, and they built digital sets, and they did effects tests, and literally he had, if not pre-sold, come as close as you can to pre-selling all of the contracts to where was going to air it, so it would be ready to go and it would be famous and popular. And all George Lucas would have had to do was say yes, and there would have been a prestige Star Wars TV show in the mid 2000s. And he would never just say yes and do it. They wrote the whole show. Yeah. And it was set in the same world as it was Star Wars Underworld, and it was set in the same world as 1313. And then they canceled 1313 as well. Like the man can't say yes. I'm always reminded when I hear stories like this of like Joss Whedon banging his head against a wall, and it's like, I don't understand why no one will let us make a Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show. Animated TV show. We have the entire cast and all of the writers doing half-hour. It would have been like Batman the Animated Series, but for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
mm-hmm.
The entire cast, except for Buffy, was going to do their voices. Everyone was on board. They did a pilot. It was all fine. And then it's like no one would pull the trigger on it. Like, here, free money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what so much of Star Wars feels like.
Oh my gosh, yes. Oh, we could be going on for probably close to an hour just me talking about all the different things that were canceled for really dumb reasons.
Okay, so let's get
But
into something that
yes.
wasn't, and a weird example of the exact right person being given a property.
Oh yeah, it's just I can't think of anyone better than Gendy for this entire thing because
Oh,
just the man understands so much of the not just the aesthetic of Star Wars, but the inspirations for so much of it.
oh,
The
absolutely.
man loves the Kurosawa and all of that. He has such a deep appreciation for it, and I have it playing in the background for me on my computer, and it's just like just watching this in motion. It's like this is how I want Star Wars to look.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I felt really sad watching it because I was watching it. There's this great moment in the first season because I know it's technically two seasons, but they cut it up into three for who knows why, scheduling reason. Like, I could never guess why, but like the last 5 episodes are technically a third season, even though it's actually cut pretty cleanly in half.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it really does feel like 2 seasons, but I understand that it was technically 3, but I think we're going to address it as if it was 2 seasons. So I'm watching the first season, and I'm really enjoying it because it starts with that like little, right after the end of the movie, clones fighting robots, and you're like, okay, and you got Yoda on a horsey, and it's great action, and I'm like, this is really solid. I mean, I know the man does incredibly solid action, so I'm not surprised, but it looks great. And then like 3 or 4 episodes in, you get to the Republic Commando sequence with them doing a raid on a tower, and I'm like, oh my god, this is on a whole other level to anything they ever have even attempted in the movies. Like, it is such beautiful action. It looks gorgeous. It is timed so well. It's all done with no dialogue, but you 100% exactly know what's happening at every second. You can identify every character because they're colorful. You know what their objectives are. Like, and every step of it makes perfect sense, and it's all just shot so beautifully.
And I do want to say here, you're not noticing how they don't talk that much. That's actually one of the big differences between this era of the Clone Wars versus what would come later is, instead of trying to humanize all the clone troopers by giving them all sorts of cute names or whatever, it was like, no, these are men who were bred to fight, and they are just awe-inspiring to see in action. You can finally understand why someone used to look at the stormtroopers before the Death Star got blown up and were like, oh gosh, I don't want to mess with them, because
they had the inherited, they inherited the badass reputation of the clone army that won the Clone Wars.
And it's just, they are so quick and efficient. It's like, you can tell that they aren't droids because they do act of their own accord. They do think for themselves more, but also you realize they're not quite the same as everyone else because they are supposed to be restricted in what they're able to do and everything. They are, by design, made to be manufactured soldiers.
Right.
But there is the fun part, and you'll notice that the arcs were a lot more inventive and stuff like that. That's because they're defective.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Which the new show is now turning around with their whole Bad Batch arc that they've got coming out. But no, in Karen Travis's stuff, to explain what the hell the arcs are, arc isn't a rank. The advanced recons were, the first wave of them were literally designated as null, as in they were just that expendable, but also that capable because they were able to think too independently for what the Kaminoans wanted. So as a result, it's like, oh, well, you're extremely good. You're like the closest we're going to get to a bunch of Jango Fett's in a squad, but also because you're a bunch of Jango Fett's in a squad, we're going to try to ensure that you go into the deadliest situation possible and ideally die before we have to do anything like Order 66, because you might actually question the orders.
Wow. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Now I get what those characters are. Oh, that's such an... and I mean, again, that doesn't appear in the show at all.
Oh, yeah.
But obviously they had that in mind with how they were being presented in the show. That is clearly something they were thinking about.
And that's what I really do love about this, is that there's a lot of intertextuality, and it makes for an experience where if you just observe it on one level, it's like, wow, those were some really cool clone commandos. But if you know more, it's like, oh, wow, I'm actually seeing Fordo and his squad deploy to Munilist, and this is what they were doing at this point, and that's just so awesome. And that happens in a bunch of ways. Like, you'll recall the 2 Jedi who were on Ilum in the caves?
Yep.
Yeah. Those 2 also had a big feature in several novels, especially the apprentice, Barriss Offee. She actually starred in what can be called essentially a military medical drama that did well enough it even got an audiobook version for each of the pair of the duology, where she was, as a teenager, having to essentially be the lead doctor on a medical research team in the middle of a conflict zone.
Wow.
And also, yeah, it's just like, that's what I'm saying, all these different characters and everything, all these different elements, like you see them in one place, you can find them in another, and it all knits together just right. Like,
well, and I think what I liked about that scene is, and it speaks to what this show does so well, is that, so I know who Mace Windu is. I know who Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker is. But the show is so well produced and so immediate with the threats and the way it sets up these situations that even with the characters I've never seen before, it so locks you into what their struggle is efficiently that I am completely on board for whatever these two characters are up to. Like, I see them. They're Jedi. They're in a cave. There are killer robots. And I'm, okay, you've got me 100% bought into these ladies' journey. Instantly, without me knowing who they are at all. And it's because he's so good at setting up these conflicts.
That, and I also think that the short time span that they work with here honestly works to their benefit because, and I am going to try to limit my comments on the successor series, but
yeah, because we will be talking about those in
but
turn.
I think that was one of the weaknesses, especially early on for the new show, was it got a solid 20 minutes or so for every episode, and as a result, there's a lot of filler. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't actually amount to much, whereas the team for the microseries, they had to make every single second count. So as a result, there was no room whatsoever for fluff or anything like that. And I think that helped a lot, because like the bit where Kit Fisto goes to Mon Calamari and he's swimming around and everything, that takes 4 episodes in the CGI series. It takes 5 minutes here, and
honestly, like I will say this: nothing against Kit Fisto, other than the fact that he is named Kit Fisto.
Yeah,
but I will say that I was about to point out that of the various segments, if you were to ask me which one impressed me the least, it would be the Kit Fisto segment. Because, and I'm trying to figure out exactly why the Kit Fisto segment impressed me the least. And I think it was literally just that, you know how I talk about how wonderfully they built up the conflicts? That one, for some reason, is just like, you got Squidman, and you got other Squidmans, and then you got a bunch of undersea ship, and he kind of looks, and I think a lot of it was, he kind of looks ridiculous, swimming and using a lightsaber underwater.
Yeah, that
really
was
does.
always one. I don't think that there had ever actually been an instance of a lightsaber being used underwater before, so
like,
they basically had to make the call there.
You've got this unbelievably gorgeous scene when Anakin is fighting the when Anakin is fighting the assassin whose name I cannot remember because I think
Asajj Ventress.
Asajj Ventress, thank you. And they have that beautiful only Genndy Tarkovsky shot would put in of both of them standing there in the pouring rain with steam coming off of their lightsabers. But then you think back, wait a minute, how was the lightsaber working underwater? Wouldn't it have just boiled off all the water? Wouldn't it just create a super, like every time, if you turned on a lightsaber underwater, wouldn't there be a giant bubble of superheated hydrogen that would immediately explode?
Instant depth charge.
Yeah, and it would be an instant depth charge, and like you couldn't function at all under those conditions. I'm like, how is it that I'm thinking about this, but the show didn't? And that is what bothered me about the Kit Fisto segment, and I couldn't get into it because I'm like, and I know it's crazy to be like, it's a thing about space wizards, you know, go easy, Hogaru, but on some level I'm like, I couldn't get over the idea that lightsabers shouldn't work underwater.
That's fair, and I know there's some people who haven't been able to get into the microseries because it is a lot more artistically inclined over realism or anything like that. They're a lot more focused on high concept fantasy than trying to, and in any way, approach anything resembling hardcore sci-fi. But it's Star Wars. I kind of am okay with that.
Oh no, I get that, but at the same time, I know that it's a weird that this is where I would draw the line, because I was about to tell you that one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing is the patently ridiculous premise that the droid army, right, the Separatist army, would build a giant flying thing that had a hammer that just hit the ground really hard.
Yep.
Like, that's such a patently ridiculous idea, but I loved that whole scene.
Oh yeah, that weapon is still it is stunningly ridiculous. Although to be fair, this is also a show where they managed to get an Akira reference in. They literally have them call in the cavalry. which just
Well,
I
we'll
still.
talk about that
Oh
one
yeah.
in a second. But no, like the thumper scene, like it's so obviously absurd, but at the
Mhm.
same time, like it doesn't violate everything you know about how. And again, I can't believe I'm saying this in a thing about space wizards, but it doesn't violate everything you know about how physics works. Like, if there was a ship with a giant, hammer on it, I guess that's what it would look like and what it would do. I don't know why anyone would build that, but I guess this is how it would operate. But the second you turned on that lightsaber underwater, I'm like, nope. Nope, you can't do that. I know that that's superheated plasma. I know how it works, okay? I understand what's going on here, and this just doesn't work for me. I had to draw the line somewhere. And the Kit Fisto episode was that line. Also, he's named Kit Fisto.
Can I add one last quick fact before we put Kid Fisto to bed?
Please do.
They actually had, surprisingly enough, they got some of the animators to help out. They had a Flash game based on the Microseries. There were three different games that you could play in that were based on various episodes. You could duel Asajj or Anakin as the other.
Cool.
I forget what's. Oh, right. The other one was what we're going to be talking about in just a second with Dirge and Kenobi. And then finally, the last one was Kit Fisto, which was done as a bullet hell ish thing where you were Kit Fisto going up against all the enemies going from left to right. And it was surprisingly good game feel despite being obviously built for kids. At least that's how I remember it. My
Huh.
memory may be faulty on this.
Interesting. Neat. Yeah, I was gonna say that was this weird golden age in the '90s and early 2000s. I mean, where starting with TIE Fighter and going through the Clone Wars games, we were just getting Star Wars games all the time.
Oh, I know, right? It
Like we
just
were
was
just
so good.
constantly getting Star Wars games, and then ever since EA bought it, they're like, "How about we just don't make any Star Wars games? How about just the one Star Wars game every 3 years, and then a ton of DLC for that game?" I'm like, "Where are the racing games? Where are the space fighting games? Where are the
Oh,
adventure games? Where are the
okay. You bring up racing. I have to complain about this now.
Please."
Respawn almost could have made a new pod racing game, but Stig and the people at the higher ups for the Jedi Fallen Order team were like, no, we want to make a Jedi game.
Come on.
It's like, dude, we have had so many Jedi games. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm totally fine with there being a modern one, but you can play as a Jedi in Star Wars Battlefront. There's even co-op and instant action now. You can experience that fantasy there.
Yeah.
I would like a modern pod racing game.
Yeah, pod racing. Again, another big RPG and adventure.
Mhm.
Do Masters of Terrace Cassie 2. Just do something crazy, you know?
That
Do
almost
a,
happened.
do a
There
new
was
fighting game.
there was actually an Xbox demo. I'll have to link you to that just over. Like, it got to the point they had two characters. The weird thing was, it was like Mortal Kombat when Mortal Kombat was 3D. It was a
Oh.
really odd thing. It's a really obscure demo. It was just used as a pitch, but yeah, that almost happened as a thing at this time. That was one of the few things, one of the only things that LucasArts was like, you know what? No, that's a bit too crazy. And then Revenge of the Sith was basically Soul Calibur anyway.
It's true. There's some good stuff in that Revenge of the Sith game. I
Oh,
actually
yes.
liked it a lot.
Mhm.
But anyway, so the point is, let's get to one of the big just showcase oh my god sequences, which
Mm.
is that whole Dirge scene.
Oh yeah. And
Wow.
yeah, I love Dirge as a character. His whole build up and everything else is just great. Like, as someone to fill the mold, like, there's been so many henchmen who have fallen into the Phasma category of, well, you existed for a second, but
Yeah.
Dirge, you just can't kill him. You just can't.
Well,
There's
yeah, he gets
actually
this build up, and you're like, can he live up to this build up? And the answer is, yeah. No, he 100% lives up to the build up he gets. He
eh,
gets cut to pieces, and he's like, nope.
do you want to actually know how he died officially in that continuity?
Please tell me.
They had to throw him into a sun. He seriously got Terminator 2'd because Anakin and Obi-Wan were still hunting him down. It happened in this one comic, and they finally managed to knock him into it. And
Oh
it's
my god.
I am very proud to say I actually have the action figure based on his design from the comic, which is fairly close to the show, but a little bit more realistic proportions, but still just.
So, do you know, I mean, because you're an expert on this, do you know what Dirge is?
Oh yeah, he's a very specific species. The species actually comes up again in Star Wars Tor. One of your companions, if you play as a Sith character, your slave companion is
One of
one
him.
of his. Yeah, they've existed for a while now. They do actually don't look all fleshy like that on the outside if you don't, like horrendously injure them or whatever. But
Okay.
yeah, they are just that regenerative. That is one of the other things I loved about this version of the Star Wars continuity is that aliens were allowed to be alien. They weren't just people with masks all the time. You could see some really weird stuff. And
Oh, there's that
Dirge,
great scene. There's that great scene where, and I mean, one of the most Star Wars feeling moments in the entire series is when Anakin is walking along on Coruscant and looking to meet up with Amidala, Queen
Mhm.
Amidala. Uh, couldn't remember her name for a second. That's bad. And he keeps looking over his shoulder, and you're like, look, it's just crazy Star Wars monsters everywhere. And they had so much fun designing and putting up just crazy Star Wars monsters.
hmm Oh, the fight pits. The fight, like every
Oh, the
single one of
fight
those
pit
characters, they
creatures.
worked out backstories for all of these random guys and everything.
What about the random? We finally saw what a big muscular version of the Hammerhead alien could do, because he's one of the
Yes.
Jedi's who's protecting who gets killed protecting
Yes.
him. Like, I've always seen this Hammerhead guy, and I'm like, what's his deal? And we finally find out what his deal is.
Oh.
Such a nice thing. But they clearly loved the weirdness of Star Wars in this, in a way that the live action stuff doesn't want to do or can't afford to do. Like, I mean, I talked already quite a bit about the Stomp ship, but there's also just like these robots that is just like a ball with two stilt legs walking around. Like, that's so nuts, and it so feels of a piece with the weirdest Star Wars design that make us really love Star Wars.
hmm
Yeah,
Oh
no,
yeah.
I love that. But Dirge, because you know what? When I was watching Dirge, do you know what he gets cut into pieces and put back together? And my first thought was, is his species actually a colony of like regrowing worms that have a hive mind? Because
I
that's kind of what it looks like, and I guess he isn't, because now you've told me that it's just his species. But
yeah.
because of his look and his ability, my first thought was, hey, were those giant monsters from Halo ripped off of this guy?
Yeah, it's like, are they the, I honestly wonder if that was something that was considered at one point because it's very, very clear that someone had to have at least used that as a reference point at one
Right?
point because
I
yeah, it is
really feel like
obvious.
they're pretty similar. And it came out while they were deep, like, what do you call it? Deep into Halo 2. Oh, no, wait, Halo 2? It's like, it feels very, there's a couple of points there where I'm like, I feel like there's some crossover here. But Dirge, I mean, the jousting scene is fantastic. His fight scene is fantastic. Just the fact that they're like, they're losing to the Jedi and the clone troopers, and they're losing and they're losing. They're about to lose, and finally Dirge is like, "Okay, I got this," and he's got 1,000 guys on speeder bikes with lances, and you're like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen," and you're not expecting it to go that nuts. But it goes that nuts. And
Mm.
in that moment, and maybe it's just me, I remember why I love Star Wars.
Oh yeah, oh my gosh, I still when I was a kid, I actually felt chilled because I was so excited the Republic was winning. They're gonna get the day, and then it's like, holy crap, this guy is just destroying
Yeah.
everything. Just
Yeah. He's not screwing around.
which
Yeah.
is so nice too, because so often, especially nowadays in Star Wars, the villains don't actually get to present that much of a threat.
Nope.
Whereas these, between Ventress and Dirge, they both just absolutely
Oh,
wreck
they're
everything.
monsters. Well, yeah. And I mean, my biggest surprise in this was, so you look at I always talk about how because again I did not see this, so I went to see Revenge of the Sith, and there's a character in Revenge of the Sith called General Grievous, and he is the least impressive character you've ever seen. He is a hunched over guy with a bad cough who spends all of his time running away from danger. That's all he does. He just keeps fleeing danger over and over again. And I'm like, this is their lead villain? This is the guy they want us to be impressed by how much they have to kill? It's like, what is the point of this guy? And then you see this and you're like, oh, he's the greatest Jedi hunter in existence. He's an unbelievably badass fighter, and they're only able to defeat him because his organic lungs were crushed by
Windu.
Oh god. Yeah, by Mace Windu right before the start of Revenge of the Sith. I'm like, oh, okay. Now I understand what was going on. Why didn't you show this before Revenge of the Sith? Because then people would have had a chance of knowing what the hell was going on here.
Oh gosh, it was.
But just the idea that it's like, I mean, yes, the Fortnite thing is more offensive. They're like, oh, well, no, you don't understand what's going on in Rise of Skywalker unless you were there for a Fortnite live event the week before the movie came out. Well, that's idiotic. But the thing about this is, that's more offensive, but in a way, I almost consider this to be, I don't want to say worse, but...
It's a shame.
It's a shame because it gives you a completely wrong impression about the characters and what's going on.
Can I give some context?
Please.
To just be clear here, things kept changing a lot during this point, because George's drafts for Revenge of the Sith kept changing. Like, seriously, someone give James Luceno some, like he has earned all the beers, because from what I recall, he was the guy who was in charge of Revenge of the Sith's novelization, as well as the novel that preluded it, and he was trying to keep up with George during all of that, and
yeah, because you have to write that so much earlier, and if you're dealing with that many drafts, oof.
Yeah, the thing is, Shaak Ti's death became a running gag in that it kept being moved up. First, she was supposed to die at the hands of Grievous in the TV show. Then she was supposed to die. There was like a full film scene with CGI and everything for Revenge of the Sith that you can still see on the cut DVD, where Grievous was actually supposed to be present a few times before that boarding encounter right at the bridge. Yeah, that's the thing. Apparently, in the very penultimate draft of Revenge of the Sith, the whole invisible hand section was like an hour long. Like, that's how much George had in there at the beginning that ended up getting trimmed and cut. So that's part of the reason why Grievous didn't have as much. But also just like there were so many things changing in development that it ended up being almost entirely offloaded onto the TV show to be like, no, really, General Grievous, he's a badass. And the thing is, he also got some really good books. And one comic I want to track down is back when Grievous was first being introduced into the continuity and everything, there was, okay, but why didn't Ventress or Dirge end up taking over? Because both of them ended up surviving what happens in the TV show.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, what if we have a job interview sort of situation? So Dirge and Ventress got pitted against Grievous in this comic, isolated on a space station, and it's all the three of them basically trying to come out on top, and Grievous manages to prove, yes, really, I'm the best one for the job. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's so much stuff for him that kicks ass. I have a friend who loves to, like, roleplay Grievous just at pretty much any opportunity because he knows this stuff even better than I do, and yet, sadly, none of that made it into the film, and sadly, the CGI version of Grievous relies more on the film version than this version.
That's okay. Well, now I'm really interested to see that because I gotta say, I was blown away by General Grievous in this. Like, there are two things that happened when watching this show, right? The whole 2 hours and change. The two big, I mean, obviously the Dirge fight is unbelievably fantastic. The gladiator pit with Ventress is amazing. The duel with her and Anakin is just a perfect 4 minutes of television. Just, I can't believe how gorgeous that whole sequence is. I mean, it's not the black and white ninja versus samurai fight, but it's still one of the finest things I've seen this man like direct as a action director. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just incredible. I mean, it's not gonna top the best Samurai Jack, but it's still amazing. All right, but here's the point I'm getting at. The two things that, and this is what I want your response on, and you've just given me the Grievous, so thank you. The two things that really got to me were, one, okay, so Grievous is supposed to be impressive, and he is impressive. Like, he's a legit scary dude in this. He gets a great introduction. He fights not only does he fight incredibly well, but he's a decent planner. He works well with his team. Like, he's an actual threat to everybody in a very real way that they don't establish at all in the movie. The second is, oh, okay, now I get Anakin Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
every bit of character development in the Anakin Skywalker in 3 movies falls completely flat. And yet, just the way you see him changing and you see characters talking about him in this, like, 2 hours, and it's a tiny piece of it is him. What, 40 minutes is Anakin Skywalker?
Yeah, he's actually got a surprisingly minimal role out of everything.
Yeah. And he gets the best development of any character. And this is the key part, it made me understand what George was going for in the films.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Because none of that made it into the films, but in the animated series, it's all right there.
Yep. And
he's a good character now.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You understand why he'd be frustrated all the time and be complaining, and you understand why he has so many things foisted upon him, and why the Jedi Council keeps being so weirdly dickish, but also trying to rely upon him. Everything suddenly clicks.
Yeah, and then you get the and you get that little flash, and you get that flash sideways, and you're like, "What's going on here?" And I'm like, "Oh, they're imagining what it would have been like had he actually been able to train like a Jedi and not been thrown into this war right from the start. If Qui-Gon Jinn had actually been able to train him properly and take him to the mirror cave and teach him about the dark side properly, maybe none of this would have happened."
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, that was actually Liam Neeson.
That was actually Liam Neeson?
Yeah, he's come back for both this show and the successor show.
Because I'm like, so many people are very good sound-alikes that I assumed that was yet another really good sound-alike. That's actually, wow. Way to go, Neeson.
And that actually raises a really great point. I want to just say here, I love how, especially in the expanded universe, at least at this point in time, actors, pretty much, if you nailed a role, you stayed as it. Bob Bergen is basically as much Luke Skywalker for me as Mark Hamill is. He was Luke Skywalker in every single game, and the same can be said for James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. His
Obi-Wan Kenobi is perfect.
Oh yeah, he is so good that it is just absolutely stunning. And the thing is, a lot of the actors in this show also did the video games. And all that sort of stuff. So you had that kind of consistency. There's one instance where James Arnold Taylor wasn't Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars game, the one with the little drama showing up. Anakin is Anakin, but they got this really weird guy who I don't know what he's going for, but he does not sound like Obi-Wan. He is probably the only actor I can think of out of the whole lineup who really did not click. Like, even some actors would appear as different characters, like the woman playing Padme, Grey Delisle. She, or Delisle, however you say it.
But yes.
Okay. But, she also appeared as a couple other different characters and handled various things. Just like, all of these actors became a cohesive group, like as if it were a proper production, and just showed up in all of these things. So you didn't have an issue where you had 1,000 different people voicing Batman. Instead, it's like, no, there's just, this is Anakin Skywalker, this is Padme, this is Obi-Wan, and it all fits.
That's such a good choice. And don't get me wrong, I think that Dietrich Bader did a fine job in the Batman.
Oh yeah,
not the Batman. Sorry, in Brave and the Bold, right?
Oh yeah.
And who was the voice of him in the Batman? They always pick good actors, but Kevin Conroy is the only Batman for me. And he always will be the only Batman.
It's a hard act to follow.
Yeah, like one of the best vocal performances of all time. Like, you're not going to beat that. But it's so great that they've been that consistent with the characters. I'm very excited to see how they develop these characters going through the series. Which brings me to my big question. Well, first off, I just want to say that it was such a smart move. Like, you see all of these different pieces of the war to get a sense of the stakes and the wide range where this kind of stuff is happening. It's all very well done.
Sorry.
What the hell was that?
That was my phone. Sorry.
It scared the hell out of me.
Sorry.
It's totally fine. But anyway. All right, but then the genius of structure of first having Anakin have the duel, right? Which is this wonderful sequence. Him, being falling into a trap and having the duel and winning the duel and just being, and only winning the duel by allowing himself to get as angry as possible, right? And then, of course, that feeds into, well, what is the dark side? And it's something that they kind of screwed up when the last Skywalker, which is like, no, you can kill people without being mad at them. Yes, but hatred and anger is what leads to the dark side. And it's a great job by the animators. It's a great job by the vocal performance to show that, no, it's not just that he's a good fighter. He's winning because he's pissed. He's winning because he hates her. And that shows you, again, going down that pathway. And then to factor that into the next sequence where he actually goes and he rescues people. And suddenly we finally see him doing something that is just big and heroic and wonderful. But at the same time, he's so that you see that there is still this darkness to everything he does that just isn't there with Obi-Wan, right? Mm-hmm. Like that even when he's being a hero, he's still a questionable guy, right? He's still letting this, he's more powerful now that he's won that duel, but where's that power coming from? Mm-hmm. And it so more effectively leads into Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, yeah.
Revenge of the Sith makes so much more sense if you've seen this animated series.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, and that was the one blessing is I did end up seeing the show before the movie because I had to wait till we could see the movie on DVD, so I think that genuinely helped out. And I do want to say, I also love that when we do finally see Obi-Wan and Anakin in their prime, when they're both Jedi Knights out there saving the galaxy and everything, and we actually see a modicum of genuine happiness in Anakin amid all of that. It's like, you still see there was a chance for hope for him to not end up being Vader, because that was the other crucial thing that the films didn't really have as much, is that no, really, he could have been a perfectly well-adjusted person if none of this had happened in this order, in this way.
Yeah, and the films lose that, but you really establish it in that second season once he's a Jedi Knight. And that's the cutoff between the two seasons, is when they decide to make him a Jedi Knight, and whoo boy does it get good in that second. The first season's great. Nobody's complaining about the first season, but that second season is, it's amazing for the character stuff they do. Also, Count Dooku gets a lot of great stuff to do. He was a complete non-entity, right, in the movies, because he just has to be Christopher Lee standing in a room for all of Attack of the Clones, and then you get the ridiculous CGI Yoda fight that I still can't stand to this day. I know some people like it. I'm not trying to judge them.
Oh no! Over the years, I have gone from, well, that was amusing, to, yeah, you know what? It was an embarrassment. It completely misses the point of being a Jedi about as much as Jedi Fallen Order did.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very harsh thing for you specifically to say, too, because anyone listening to this, let's just say Unabridged had some very strong feelings about Jedi Fallen Order that you can check out in his review over at The Escapist. And I encourage everyone to do that. Oh, boy. You were taking no prisoners in that review.
I was hopeful. They gave me every reason to hope for it.
Yeah.
And then those hopes were dashed.
Oh, quite expertly, in fact. But anyway, yes, I was very happy with that review. But the point is, this thing has done the impossible, because I saw opening weekend, maybe opening night. I don't remember exactly if it was the Friday or the Saturday. I know I didn't go to, the Thursday early show or whatever, but I did see it right away. Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say that it was this weird experience where I often talk about how I had a better experience playing Lego Revenge of the Sith, Lego Revenge of the Sith, than I did watching the movie. And I will always say that it's a better video game than it is a movie. But beyond that, that movie, without this, I still don't think it's a great movie, right? But without this, that movie is kind of trash. But with the Clone Wars, with having seen the Clone Wars, now that movie makes sense, And parts of it actually resonate in a way they just didn't if you were just watching the movie without having seen this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is the thing that has surprised me most about this project is if you had told me, a month ago when we first decided to sit down and watch all of this thing, or however long ago it was, right, that I was going to come away from this project having new respect for Revenge of the Sith, I would have said you're crazy. Because I thought nothing could possibly make me care at all about that movie. But here we are. I am now honestly saying that with this, that movie makes a lot more sense. Anakin Skywalker's emotional journey makes a lot more sense. All of the characters' actions in it make a ton more sense. It's just a better product for having seen this.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was very excited. And in case we haven't already said this enough, some of the best animation you've ever seen in action.
Oh my gosh. And it's got the whole Tartakovsky thing where it's like no repeated shots. Everything is a new angle, everything is a new perspective. And I love that too, because everything always feels like there's something happening, something's moving, there's a reason to care. It's not just
especially his what do you call it? His trademark style where it's like you've removed every unnecessary frame.
Mm-hmm.
He just cuts, every time somebody jumps, they're just gone. Right? Every time somebody jumps, they're just gone. Someone starts to swing a sword, and the sword swing is done, and a guy has been cut in half. It is the minimalism of the animation as well as of the art design really just sells how fast and jarring and incredible all of this. Not only is the camera work beautiful, but the actual way he has animated the character is, I'd say it's like nothing else, but it's just like Samurai Jack. But it is so, as you said at the start of this, it so fits with the things he's referencing and the kind of story he's trying to tell. So yeah, just an amazing piece of work for this guy. And as we move into a CGI series, I can only expect I'm going to be very disappointed by the lower production value. No, don't say one word. Don't control yourself. I know that I've essentially entrapped you there into ruining it for me. So I'm gonna say, my bad. I apologize. Don't say one word. We will get there.
Yes. Oh my goodness, we will. And I do want to say, one last thing I wanted to say about the acting is, I love the guy they got for season 2 for Grievous. Season 1, he's all right, but season 2, I love him. He sounds like, I buy this. This is who General Grievous should sound like, not, the guy, I can't do the voice, but the guy from the intro to SpongeBob. That's what he sounds like in Revenge of the Sith and in the CGI series.
Yeah. He's really good in this. I now really enjoy General Grievous. Who would have thunk it? And yet my only experience in the past with General Grievous is, well, that's actually a pretty badass character to play as in Lego Star Wars, because those four lightsabers really get the job done pretty quickly. And the thing I said when I was watching Lego Star Wars, when I was watching Revenge of the Sith, now I'm only thinking about Lego Star Wars, which is an amazing game, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's a great series.
But specifically that first one, whoo doggy. What really bothered me about it, right? Because I played the whole thing first day co-op. We just sat down and played the whole thing from beginning to end and had a great time. But the point I'm getting at is, right, and this is what really puzzled me about it is, when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, why would you make a character with 4 arms when the whole point of doing this fight scene is he's got to fight a real person? But you're not going to be able to have a stuntman swinging 4 lightsabers, so you can't choreograph a fight between a stuntman and Ewan McGregor. So it's just going to be a bunch of CGI nonsense. And so right away, they just cut off 2 of his arms so they can start doing with a stuntman and it can start looking okay. And I'm like, well, why did he have 4 arms in the first place? And then you watch the animated series and you're like, oh, well, if it's animated, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense in the animated version, but it's like, they should have known this wasn't going to work on the big screen. All right. So that's my final statement on the show is, it is magnificent. It really is. If you haven't seen this thing, you really owe it to yourself to check it out. It is, bracingly violent, really well acted, adds much needed context to the series. You finally got to see Mace Windu do something as badass as his character's reputation suggests he should be.
Oh my gosh, yes, and they don't waste a ton of time with his stoicism being, well, I'm going to just be a huge stick to Anakin Skywalker constantly. It's like, no, actually, there's a reason for this. He's the Samurai Jack of this universe.
Yep. Oh. Him running into a kid. That's so perfect. That whole scene, that whole episode is just amazing. So, what are we going to be watching next?
Well, are you brave enough to see the Star Wars: The Clone Wars movie?
So, is the movie not part of the first season?
Okay, so
how does it work exactly?
Okay, so for some reason, back in the day when they were first conceiving the CGI series, Lucas, rather insulting complimentary, claimed that this microseries was a pilot for an actual TV show that he wanted to do, which would then become the CGI series. And the original plan with the CGI series, it was going to be simultaneous to this. It was going to star Ashla, this young little Togruta girl who you see in Attack of the Clones, and she was going to have a Twi'lek master, and Anakin and Obi-Wan were only going to appear briefly because at the time the writing team were like, well, that story's already been told, all of this has already been established, which is something I do want to say because I realize I do knock the Clone Wars a lot for its retcons, but at one point they were planning to be incredibly respectful to everyone else's work. It's just that George kind of came in and was like, oh, no, she's Anakin's apprentice. And because he's the man in charge, essentially...
They had to do it that way.
They ended up it essentially became a continuity reset, and he essentially was like, oh yeah, go nuts, just change whatever you want. And
So now Anakin's got an apprentice.
Yes, and here's the irony is, at one point, this was all still supposed to be happening in the same continuity, which as a result, you know that brief montage where Anakin goes from being a Padawan to being a Jedi Knight?
Of course.
The entire CGI series fits within that span.
In that montage?
That is the entire time span
in the CGI. Oh
except for the latest season that's coming out now, that's in the new timeline, because Clone Wars in this screwy thing where it's in both continuities to some extent or another. And gosh, I wish we would just pretend it wasn't in the Legends continuity. But yeah, it actually ended up becoming so. It's like, okay, so we have already all this other stuff set up with Anakin where there is no mention of an apprentice. How are we going to work around this? And basically everyone just kind of had to shrug and go with it. So the movie is essentially a 3-episode startup, like a Disney afternoon show. Okay. And then the next 6 seasons are a number of multi-part stories told out of order. Like there's an episode in the TV show that is set before the movie explaining some of the weird things that happened in the movie that didn't make sense, that only came out like in season 2, so most people by that point had forgotten the movie had even happened.
Wow.
It is such a clustercriff of confusing narrative choices that, like, it's probably best to just start with the movie because the movie is easily the roughest of everything, and it does get better from there. There's some stuff around the times of season 3 to season 6, the CGI show finds its footing, stops Xeroxing other people's stories and starts making its own, and it starts working. There's one that I will simply call the Umbaran arc that was very, very good. They got the guy who played Lee Everett to play one of the main characters, and he has a blast with it. He does a marvelous job with it. But yeah, the CGI show, it's kind of a mess.
Well, you know what? I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah.
So we're going to start. We're going to be back here soon with another episode where we are watching Clone Wars, the movie. We're going to talk about that. And then after that, we'll go into season 1 in an episode after that. But yeah, this should be a fun ride. Okay. So where can people find your things?
Well, you can find me every week on The Escapist at Second Look, my column where I take a look at all sorts of odd games. My most recent one just went up this week as of recording, was about Assassin's Creed Syndicate and how it has one of the best dynamic difficulty curves I've ever seen. And you can also find me on YouTube at the Unabridged Gamer, where I do all sorts of other types of things, like just regular old video reviews and all sorts of odd content. I'm going to be looking at some very interesting motion games in the near future. The very first motion review is on the editing table right now. I'm very excited to finally get more stuff rolling out for Unabridged Gamer, so keep an eye out there, and just Unabridged Gamer pretty much everywhere else on social media and such.
All right, so be sure to check that out. Of course, you can find the rest of my stuff here on the buttons. There's going to be an Unabridged Gamer link in the box below this video. And of course, as always, the game that has been being played this whole time, in case the title screen that's been on for a while now hasn't told you, is Zombie Army 4 Dead War. Which is just one of the best games. Perhaps next time it will be us playing co-op while we chat. Who can say? It's largely dependent on him. So we'll see you back here for that, but until then, I'm going to say au revoir.
Cheers.